Yes.
Welcome to the EMDR Journey Through the Eyes podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Couch, and I'm here with Rewired 360 on a beautiful Monday. Today, we have the glorious benefit of having Rachel Block Stewart here with us today, and she will be a guest presenter at our Healing Summit in 2 weeks. And so we're so happy to have her here. I'm just going to turn the mic over to Rachel to tell you a little bit about herself.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me, Kathy. I really appreciate being here and any opportunity really to speak about this subject that's near and dear to my heart. So I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Florida, and I have been a licensed mental health counselor since I graduated from grad school in 2011. So I'll let everyone do the math for that. And I have been a yoga therapist since with the International Association of Yoga Therapists, certified since 2016, and started my experience with yoga in 2008. And so, really, for the past 2 decades, almost, I have been working really my hardest about helping people and helping people who particularly have been experiencing trauma is my specialty, anxiety, life transitions, depression, and yoga and mindfulness, as well as EMDR, are just two of my approaches that I use in the therapy room that I've found really helpful for clients I work with, as well as myself too. And I never like to offer anything that I haven't willingly experienced myself. So I'm happy to be here.
And let's just start a little bit about how did you kind of get into this journey? How did you start? What kind of prompted you, sort of, as a therapist, and then the yoga practice in general?
Sure. So, oh, this is always such a tough question because sometimes I have a different answer, I think, depending on the day. I think ultimately, we're called in certain directions. So what's really spoken to me is about just making the world a better place. And so I've known since I was younger that I wanted to help people, and that just transformed, in my teens and 20s. And at one point, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and then I wanted to be a nurse, and then I realized I couldn't pass organic chemistry. So I found community health and social work, and therapy was just a wonderful way to be able to show up and hold space and help other people who are navigating really challenging times. Yoga really has become so popularized in the US over the last, golly, I guess maybe 30, 40 years. And so around the same time that I started, around after my experience in undergrad, so around whatever they call the first decade of the 2000s, I was introduced to yoga in concept, and I was always very intimidated to try it. And so, taking the first step was a really big deal. And like many people who have experienced yoga, that shavasana, or that lying on the mat, that meditation is such a unique and powerful experience. And so, like many others, I said, I want more of that. I signed up for my first yoga teacher training thinking it was actually a retreat. So stumbled upon this by accident. And since then have just been so just empowered and amazed in the overlaps between yoga and mental health counseling. During my training, I remember thinking, like, how have people not made this connection yet? It's all about connecting to yourself, connecting with thoughts, and being able to take the steps that you need to be able to get to this kind of next step in your growth, figuring out who you are and where you want to be. So,
So beautiful, right? Isn't that amazing?
yeah.
It's amazing how that can just transform and move forward. And what was it inside of you that connected the ideas together with yoga and mindfulness? How did that move you? What was that like?
So I remember sitting in one of my teacher trainings, and it- there is one of the primary texts of yoga called Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. And one of the first, well, it's technically the second sutra, talks about attending to the mental chatter. This is, of course, a translation into English and my own paraphrasing of it. And that term and really the crux of what yoga is and mindfulness is, which is attuning to and being present with and easing that mental chatter, was exactly what therapy and psychology and mental health was so much to me, was how to recognize and attend to that mental chatter. And so I was like, bam. And then for me, ever since then, it was always a parallel journey between therapy, all mental health counseling, and yoga and mindfulness. Here I am.
So when you think about this journey that you've been on, and you think about these ideas, when we go to school and we're all excited about CBT and therapy, was yoga and mindfulness on your radar then, or did you grow into it, or how was that experience for you?
Yeah, I've been very lucky along the way to have really open-minded teachers and supervisors and colleagues. So in grad school, they talk about one of our professors said, if you were going to create a niche, like what would be your specialty? And because I was practicing, I started to really explore yoga at the time. I had really started thinking about this concept of integrating and incorporating yoga into that. And then some of the first community mental health agencies I've worked at were really wonderful and open about saying, if it is, evidence-based to some degree, or if there is justification for using this intervention and this approach to help people, like by all means, go for it. So it really was encouraged to use yoga. And that really helped me think about how do you translate what you experience in the yoga studio or on your mat into a mental health counseling
Right.
room. Because
Take it to the mat. Yeah.
there wasn't that many trainings, and they really are very new and developing on how to incorporate these two over the last maybe 10, 15 years really has exploded, which is wonderful that they have that.
Yeah, and talk about if you had some key tips for therapists. Our summit's all about therapists and learning and helping us fill our own cup. What would be some practices maybe that you've done, or just a few tips that you can share with our audience about um, just tips that can improve our life, right? Because we're in so much stress all the time.
Yeah, so this may be really a good place to introduce a little practice and really how I have thought about and kind of, and I by no means take this is not a Rachel original. This is so much of my training in yoga therapy and a big part of mindfulness based cognitive therapy, which is a evidence-based therapeutic approach to bringing mindfulness into the therapy room, particularly to help people who have experienced major depressive episodes, major anxiety episodes, and on a reoccurring basis to help reduce the intensity and severity of these episodes. And so the most recent part of my experience and my study and how I've been able to find effective ways to bring mindfulness and yoga into the therapy room is through mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And so that is typically a 8-week, 9-week small group presentation where you're teaching mindfulness skills, you're teaching about just the basis of how our mind works, especially our mind that is prone to having depressive episodes or anxiety episodes. So, with that long disclaimer, I would love to just take a few minutes and just kind of walk us through a little tiny
That
practice.
would be great. Yes, totally open.
Okay. Okay. So, it's really important to just meet yourself where you're at today. So, no preconceived notions, no rights or wrongs, no supposed to's, kind of like that disclaimer in EMDR. And I think about the beginning where there's no right way, there's no wrong way. And truly, the same is true with mindfulness. And so we can do this either in a seated position here on your chair, if you're on the floor or lying on the ground, or you can even do it standing up. Just finding a comfortable place to be in and to steady yourself into here. And as you're here, feeling maybe it's your seat on the chair, your bottom on the chair here. Maybe your feet are on the floor and you feel those connected to the floor. Maybe you can feel your back here kind of straighten in a bit. And in this practice that we'll engage in today, you are welcome to have your eyes open or to have them closed. Really completely your choice and whatever feels most comfortable for you. For this practice today, you are always going to be in choice, meaning you get to always decide what is best for you, whether that is my recommendations as I guide us through this little mini practice today, or if it's something different that feels more right for you. So, as we settle into this mindfulness practice, it can help to have an anchor in this practice. So, anchors can be so many things. It can be that felt sense of your bottom on the chair, or your feet on the floor, or your back on the ground. It can be a felt sense of maybe the breath coming into your body, maybe through your nose, the rise and fall of your chest, or the rise and fall of your shoulders or your belly. It can be another sensory anchor, maybe your hands and that sensation there. Sometimes having an anchor in our body is a little too much. And so there's always the option of finding an anchor to maybe the sound around you, or maybe if it is more comfortable for your eyes to be open today, something visually pleasant to settle into that's on your horizon. And here in this practice, we're just going to notice, we're just going to be aware of that anchor of our choice. And just bringing awareness to that anchor. And the anchor I'll be using today, we'll go with the breath. And for you, listener, it is the anchor that feels most supportive and comfortable for you. And so just noticing maybe that felt sense of your anchor, or if it's a sound or a vision, just noticing the qualities of that sound or the color and the texture of that image. And just being here from this place of curiosity, openness, and recognizing here just the tendencies of the mind, which may just be to wander. And if the brain and the mind wanders, just bringing it back to the anchor of choice here. And being here for a few breaths with kindness to yourself, curiosity, and noticing what you notice. Noticing if the mind has wandered, to bring it back to that anchor and just see what you're noticing now in this moment with these qualities that are present. And taking this sensation here in your anchor and beginning to expand it out to the rest of your body. Maybe it travels up or down or out. And maybe the sound, if that's your anchor, travels in or around. And when you're ready, coming back to the moment here with us in the room.
Wow. What did you notice for yourself as you're facilitating that? How is that for you?
So for me, it's always it really does bring me to the present moment a lot more guiding it than when I'm practicing it. I don't know, maybe not a lot more. It depends on the state of mind I'm in. But it really is lovely. Mindfulness based cognitive therapy, one of their tenets in their teachings is it's very important for the practitioner or the facilitator, the teacher, to have their own practice and to be practicing at the same time that they're facilitating, which is quite different than my training as a yoga teacher, which was
Okay.
to walk around the room and make sure that, kind of keep an eye on people, make sure that they're practicing safely if they need assist or support. And so, as a facilitator, I am going to also keep my eyes and attune to the participants in practicing mindfulness, but I'm also attuning to myself too and practicing that and guiding it along with my own experience. And then after the practice is over, exactly like what you did to what you did, Kathy, for me as a teacher and facilitator, that's what we're doing for the participants. And that's really where this does blend so nicely into the therapy room is you guide this practice and then you check in and you say, how was that for you?
Yeah.
What did you notice? Which of course, as maybe you're already hearing that there are so many parallels between mindfulness and yoga and teaching that practice and some of the modalities we use as mental health counselors, particularly EMDR, particularly.
Yeah, with EMDR, I'm curious. So for our listening audience, EMDR, we have a period of stabilization in phase two, we call it. And so that's where we're really reducing our distress. How have you fit that into phase two? Or what are maybe some different approaches, maybe as you're growing as a practitioner? I know when I started doing phase two, I'm here with my scripts and I'm reading and then I've just sort of found myself and I thought I could bring my full self into that and I could give myself permission to now expand and grow because I understood the basics and now I could grow. How have you experienced that? There's two questions. How have you experienced that? And then how have you incorporated or see it differently with mindfulness-based CBT than maybe some other interventions and resourcing?
Yeah. Oh, excellent questions. Okay. So it makes me think of when I had one of my first consultants, and she, of course, it was my basic training and really emphasized that stage one or phase two stabilization preparation phase. And one of the things she said to me was because I said, "Oh, can you share some? Like all I have is the basic ones from our training." And she was like, "Oh, I have so many." And then I was like, "So many? Like I thought there were only like three or four." And and I remember just being so like, "What?"
Real,
And
I know.
now I'm in this place and I'm like, "Oh, I get it. I get it."
Yeah,
And so there are so many ways that I really bring this work in to working with people experiencing trauma, people that I am using this EMDR approach with. So, first, I think it's really important to understand EMDR as a psychotherapy approach. And so I'm looking at it in that sense. So part of the assessment phase, I'm wondering, do they have a practice in ways that self-soothe, that ground?
yeah,
Um, and so entering in, there are so many different mindfulness approaches, so many different yoga therapy approaches that can be interwoven into helping people find stability in the present moment. helping them recognize what they're experiencing internally, what they're experiencing externally, and most importantly, what they need to care for themselves. And so I've said that mindfulness is really one way to do that, but I feel like it has become in and of itself a therapeutic approach for me, this kind of Eastern
Yeah.
psychology that both mindfulness based cognitive therapy and yoga therapy is based on. And so, really helping uh, the participants I'm working with or the clients I'm working with find that within their own experience. And as I was guiding the practice today, you may have noted that I did talk a lot about body, but especially for people experiencing trauma, like their breath and their body is too triggering for them. So then we start outward first. And so that really is something that I've so appreciated in my journey in learning these different approaches, training different teachers I've had, different consultants I've had, and being a certified yoga therapist and EMDR therapist is that it allows you to have this really broad understanding of what does the person in front of me need, where are they at, and how can I offer that in the best way that's accessible to them. And for some people, mindfulness is not going to be something that they want to
Yeah.
explore or approach, and that's completely okay. And for I think many people, I mean, I wouldn't say many people. I haven't counted, but some people will be open to that concept, and for other people, then we're just talking about what is their experience like in this moment, like what are they noticing, how's their body feel, how are they feeling here in the room, what are they is there a pleasant song? Is there an image? Even some of the very traditional EMDR phase two techniques like safe, calm place, like light stream. These are all, yeah, and all the breath work we talk about, and some of those, well, I wouldn't say breath work, breath awareness, which is very different than breath work, really do incorporate mindfulness practices into it as well.
Yeah, and I think when I heard about mindfulness, it can be a lot of different things. It doesn't just have to be sitting and breathing on a mountaintop in India, right? It's a very internal experience. It can be just breathing. It can be just resting, feeling my foot on the floor, listening to the birds, hearing the clock, smelling the scent. So even a lot of those strategies are really self-care kinds of strategies to really kind of help us rest and digest as we get into our systems and not be so activated all the time.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's where I really appreciate this most recent journey I've been on with learning about mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and how to use that approach is that it introduces so many different mindfulness practices. And really, I see it very much as this really helpful foundation to then step into the working phase, whether it's working with trauma or anxiety or depression or just navigating the world that we're living in, right? So it is talking about all of these senses that we experience. It talks about mindful eating. It talks about just a body scan. It talks about mindful movement, being aware of that breath, that there are so many different practices and tapping into the sense, noticing our mood state, our thoughts, et cetera. It expands from there, is such a great way to help people. And again, going back to that stabilization phase and EMDR phase two, is helping people recognize when they're in their window of tolerance, when they're out of their window of tolerance, and giving them skills and strategies to use to help find their way back
So were
into that.
you involved with yoga first or and then EMDR trained or what came first for you?
What came first? Okay, now you're making me use my memory here. So, so in all fairness, let's see. So I Started grad school in 2009. My first yoga class officially was 2008, but I did an undergrad. So before that, I was working in the community health realm. I had worked at crisis center hotlines. And so it's always so hard to trace where our therapy journey really
Right,
started.
right, yeah.
And but for me, that first yoga experience was in 2008 on the mat. And so 2008, yeah. And I remember I had lived in Hawaii for a little bit before I moved to Washington State, which is where I had my first yoga class. And I had been talking to people about going to a yoga class. I should go to a yoga class. And I saw all these places where they had it. And I was so intimidated. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what if I don't know what I'm doing? And I
Yeah,
go there and
yeah.
anxiety. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. It's at a gym. And then from there it was like a daily practice. That really just opened itself up to me. So um hard to say, really around the same time. But
Oh,
I definitely
absolutely.
was more drawn to therapy and counseling and helping. And then yoga came along on that journey.
And then when did you begin the EMDR journey?
Okay. It's another great question. So I feel like sometimes we start things cognitively, like in our head, like with intention
Yes,
first. And
yes, yeah.
so, in 2000, when did I start grad school? 2009. 2010, I remember one of the people in my class had talked about EMDR and how their sister was doing it at our provider in town was doing it, and they raved, but they didn't talk too much about it in my counseling program. But I was like, wait, is this effective? Tell me more.
Yeah.
And I started doing my own kind of research and reading up on it. And I don't even remember when I picked up, Bessel van der Kolk's first book, or The Body Keeps the Score, not his first book, but The Body Keeps the Score. And then just diving into trauma modalities and treatments, which is what I had been pulled towards. And so it wasn't until 2017, I think, that I had, excuse me, gotten licensed and saved up enough pennies to do the training,
Mhm.
because I know about the great the humanitarian assistance programs, and I worked at a nonprofit, and maybe I would have started it earlier if I'd known that. Excuse me. But so 2017, and then ever since. And now it's my primary modality I use with the majority of people I work with.
Now, what was it like when you had the sort of integration effect, when you felt like, oh, this makes so much sense with all that I've been doing? Because it took me a little while after I began practicing EMDR. I specialize in grief and loss and death and dying. And so it took me a while to kind of conceptualize and meld them both together to really kind of feel comfortable in myself, yet also still within the protocol, but then also sort of the EMDR magic happens and you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually cleared. I don't want to say cured, but your symptoms have resolved to a clinical level where they're maintaining stability over time. I cannot believe this, right? It was so magical. What was that like for you?
Hmm. I I remember there's one client that I have in mind, and I think for many people, there are the somatic pieces that show up in trauma. And I remember in my training, they were like, it can show up in lots of different ways, somatic, one of them. And so the person in front of me, my participant, they had a headache and we were doing the work. And I was like, okay, is this part of it? And so I kept on going and I kept on going. And then, a few sets later, they were like, I don't have the headache anymore. And
Right.
I was like, keep your face straight, Rachel. Like that's supposed to happen. How did that happen? And so I think that really highlighted the mind, body, psyche, spirit connection, and how, for some people it is all, interwoven in that very much so.
How exciting was that for you? Like, you had your straight face. How excited were you after you had that experience?
Yeah, it was, I never turned back because I was just like at this huge, like how I feel like I am now
Yeah,
is how with them. And I think it caught me very much by surprise too. And I am so grateful now that I have a greater understanding of that because it's really helped me prepare people better because I think for some people it can be really scary
yes, yeah,
like what just like happened how did they do
yeah,
this
yeah,
or I mean, so it's really helped me prepare people in a way that lets them know that, it's the way that the body works. It's the way that they're connected. And I do some education about neuroscience and, maybe not all the details about I'm thinking like now afferent neurons and efferent neurons and, holding, this in our muscles. And, I don't I mean, maybe I'll have someone in my office who's open to using that language, and so we'll use that language. But I think it really helps people to know that amazing things can happen, and it feels so good to be a conduit or a provider, just hold space
right.
with them while they're having that experience. Because I think it's really important for me to stay humble and not to think that
Yeah,
I doing this because I'm not doing this.
right.
I'm just really providing the space and the understanding for them to enter into this space when and how they're ready. And, some people I've seen them for like 3 sessions, maybe. We've done some intensive work, targets are cleared and I don't see them again. And then other people were going on year like 4 because there's some really complex trauma that they're navigating. But also, the world we live in right now is
Yeah.
not necessarily one made for stabilization and security for many people.
I
So,
love how you just said that. Yeah, that's very in safety. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that your way that you presented that just makes me feel like calm, like, ooh, yes. I think the Dr. Shapiro talks about the relationship and the way that we enter into that. And this is an integration of all of the therapies and all of the therapy types. And um, it took me a while to kind of think about like, oh, okay, I can land and I can be, it is a protocol, but we can also use our space and ourself, in an interaction with them. And also I like to say I'm like a facilitator though, like they're kind of like a little, maybe lost on the map and I can kind of guide them and but also like they're still in charge and you're in control of the pace and the way where we go. And so it's really can be very empowering way to approach trauma work. I worked on with some parolees and they engage in narrative and TFCBT therapy where you tell the narrative and the thought and the body. It was almost like vicarious trauma for myself because I'm like, I don't somehow intuitively, somewhere in my inner knowing, I knew there's a better way of healing than this. And so
mhm.
that became my reason of like, what is this EMDR thing? And why are people calling me saying, do you know how to do EMDR therapy? And what is this? And I think it's been it's changed the way that I practice and it changed the way that I view trauma. So I'm curious about what are some misconceptions people have about yoga, even EMDR and mindfulness in the context of mental health? And what do you do when they kind of bring them to you? And what is that educational process like for you?
Yeah. So I think let's start with yoga, mindfulness, misconceptions. Only because many people will come to me already knowing about EMDR. And so I feel like, so I'll save that for last because many people come to me for help with anxiety, depression, trauma, and aren't necessarily coming to work through a yoga lens or a mindfulness lens, are open to it, and are aware of that can be a modality or tool that we use in the therapy room, but don't quite. understand how it translates
Right.
in the therapy room versus those that come to me for a yoga therapy class or mindfulness based cognitive therapy class. It's a little bit different. So I think it's really important to, maybe not really important. Let's see, misconceptions. So I think like me, many people are like yoga equals the studio, equals movements, equals posture, equals asana, has this image of this archetype of the yogi in their mind. Um, and at least for mindfulness-based cognitive therapy approaches, the practice I use with mindfulness and yoga in the therapy room as a mental health counselor with EMDR or trauma in that realm. Mindfulness and yoga is about a bigger picture. So, Raja Yoga, which is also known as the eight limbs of yoga, it's asana is just one of, or postures is just one of those components. So the first two components talk about ethics, social ethics, like how do you interact with the world and how do you care for yourself? And so that's really the foundation of what we're doing. With mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, it really talks about how can you connect to your body in a way to decenter from thoughts and unpleasant feelings in a way that helps you respond as opposed to react.
Right.
So we look at those components, and then the next step with yoga or mindfulness really is about, okay, so let's connect to these aspects of ourselves. And sometimes it's mindful movement, but sometimes it's just that practice of what we had done earlier of sitting and connecting to our body and noticing what our body is, telling us. It may be a part we can feel or a part we can't feel, and that's okay. And just accepting that with non-judgment there in that moment. And then it may, as we're ready, we move on to awareness of the breath, awareness of the mood, awareness of the thoughts. This is called the Panchakosha model in yoga therapy, which is looking at these different layers or sheaths of self, which is koshas, which is the body, the breath, feeling states, mind state, thought, and then bliss, which is connection to whether it be higher power or universal forces, whatever it is that you connect with in that state. And so I think really it broadens so many people's not just understanding, but it allows me to come in and saying, where can I meet you? Like, what are you needing? Where are you at? And how do we incorporate this together? And I think with EMDR, the one that comes to my mind is that I think people think that I'm just gonna, I tell people when I first heard about EMDR, I thought like, oh, it's supposed to make everyone feel really good and happy. And then I'm like, okay, so it doesn't do that, but it neutralizes things.
Yeah.
And I've recognized that, okay, it's not just about, oh, everyone just needs to get EMDR and we'll all be happy.
Right.
It just neutralizes. I also tell people it's not like eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. I'm not going to erase anything
Uh-huh.
in your it's just going to help you, again, just have it be another memory, another experience.
So
And
what
so,
are
whether,
some client transformation experiences that you've had with yoga and mindfulness? What are some success stories that you've had?
okay, so some success stories. I think the ones that stand out in my mind, the biggest are the ones that are quite subtle. So I have had a variety of clients that have come that have had previous numerous mental health hospital stays, inpatient facilities, clients that have had numerous ER visits due to physical um, conditions to some degree. And over the course of our work together with mindfulness, some I've used just mindfulness and just yoga therapy. Some I've used a combination of EMDR and mindfulness and yoga therapy. Is I remember whenever clients will sometimes think, I don't know if I've had much progress. Then we talk about how they used to be having hospital, like going to the ER like every 6 weeks. And when's the last time they went? It's been 2 years. And oh, you had all of these episodes of mania, these episodes of inpatient hospitalization. And wait, you haven't had to be hospitalized. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's been hard that these symptoms haven't kind of, ebbed and flowed, but that you've been able to relate to it differently, to care for yourself in ways that it really has helped you be able to develop a way to manage it. And it's not just within themselves, it's building this huge network of resources and support around for themselves that really is helpful for them, internally and externally. And so those are some of my, most wonderful experiences when I these are clients that I remember in the first assessment and intake. I'm like, okay, I hope I'll be able to help, or this, sounds like
Yeah.
you've had a tough experience, or, is this, going to be something I can help with? And then, later we're like, wow, look at this place that you've gotten to. So those are really powerful
Yeah,
experiences.
that is powerful. I wanted to comment on something you shared about the body. A lot of people, I don't say a lot of people, but some people can't connect with their body. So I say, what do you notice on your thought, your body, or your emotion channel? And a lot of they can identify the thought and the emotion channel, but the body channel can be somewhat ethereal. So I think that it's very important that we're connecting to the body channel. We're seeing, like you have said, what's on it, what does it sound like? Is it loud or is it noisy or is there anything, And so just kind of going through that with them can really help understand where is the body located and those kinds of things there. So if we were interested as practitioners in incorporating mindfulness and yoga into our practice, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, so I want to answer this question in addition to piggybacking on what you just
Okay.
said. I think so much of the work that I do, well, not, well, yes, I do with mindfulness, but mindfulness in and of itself is helping people differentiate what is a physiological condition that I have. I have a heart condition. I have an autoimmune condition. I have diabetes. Like I can't change that. Yoga therapy isn't going to change that. Mindfulness isn't going to change that. EMDR isn't going to change that. So mindfulness based cognitive therapy started from mindfulness based stress reduction.
Okay.
Um, Approach from John Kabat-Zinn, and he had studied Theravada. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Theravada Buddhism in I don't know his whole story. John Kabat-Zinn. We can Google it and
Yeah.
find his origins. But so he did all of this study, and his teacher said, "Yes, you're ready. You can go and bring that, back to the States." And so he is centered out of University of Massachusetts Memorial Hospital, UMass up there. And so he developed this whole protocol incorporating yoga, incorporating mindfulness practices, incorporating Eastern philosophy into the hospital setting. It started first with people with heart conditions. And in this 8 week, 2 hour week group mindfulness training practice that it showed with the research he did that it reduced the frequency and exacerbation of reoccurring symptoms and just helped them manage their symptoms
Okay.
and help them report a greater confidence and feeling like they could manage or respond differently
Okay,
to
great. Wow.
the mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy are both excellent approaches for practitioners to get continuing education training on the approaches of using mindfulness in a mental health or a physical health setting. Yoga is, oh golly, there are so many different yoga trainings out there. So first and foremost, I would absolutely encourage anyone who's interested in bringing this into their practice to develop their own practice for themselves. So my practice started in the gyms. I took yoga in the gyms. And again, the first training that I stumbled upon, I thought I was going on a retreat and it was a training. And I was like, I'm gonna be a teacher, yoga teacher here in this training. And then as I learned a little bit more, then I was like, okay, I want to learn more. I know, I'm a mental health practitioner, so let me learn more about the body. So my first training was with Yoga Fit, and then I found a local training because I didn't have a lot of money. I was a new therapist. I couldn't go and travel with lovely teacher training for yoga therapy that specializes specifically in incorporating mental health, learning how to guide these practices with mental health conditions in mind. So, like Phoenix Rising Yoga Therapy is one, Life Force Yoga Therapy is another teacher training. And there's so many out there that do incorporate that. And then there are lots of studios local to you that offer any listener training. And there are so many different lineages of yoga to travel down. So find the one that speaks to you. Don't just get a training just so you can bring it into the therapy room, because that's a huge disservice for yourself and for the people you're working with. So
And for the
develop.
summit, what are you, sorry, I didn't introduce.
Oh, go ahead. I could talk forever about this.
Can you, for the summit, what can listeners expect from the summit and your presentation? You put together this magical blend of all kinds of things. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So for the summit, my objectives really and my hope for people who are attending is to be able to recognize within themselves a greater awareness of their own inner experiences, embodied experiences, whether that be in their actual physical body, mood states, thought processes, and walk through each stage of mindfulness based cognitive therapy. Like I said, there are 8 sessions. And so it'll be, of course, a brief little, it won't be a full training by any means, but brief little information about what happens in each of those weeks and what to expect, and not just the intention and objective for each of those weeks, but also some of the practices that are given to participants to help them gain and practice a greater sense of mindfulness and awareness within themselves. And then ultimately being able to then help others recognize and respond to mood states within them. So whether it be the participants or the clients that they work with, other people in their lives, just to help be able to track, notice, and offer something mindfulness related skills to them.
This is so powerful. I think we can all use these even in DBT, EMDR, mindfulness-based CBT. I think these are really kind of the step up in ways that we can regulate ourselves. So I wanted to say thank you so much for coming and sharing. Where can people find you? How do they connect to you? Do you have a website? Do you teach, train? Give us all the goods.
Thanks. So, the best way to contact me in this context is through my website. I guess it is mine. It's mindfulness-based yogatherapy.com. So this is my website, mindfulness-based-yogatherapy.com, for mindfulness-based cognitive therapy groups, small groups. I will be starting up another small group cohort in the fall.
Wow, okay.
Me on this website for one-on-one mindfulness or yoga therapy work. And also, this website can be used to contact me if you are interested in my other practice, because they are two separate. While they can be interwoven,
Uh-huh.
I teach in the mindfulness based cognitive therapy is more of a teaching piece. And so if you're interested in EMDR therapy, feel free to use this website. And if you are in the state of Florida, then I can help and offer whatever the mental health counseling therapy may need to look like for you or a client you have that you want to refer that's in Florida. And the mindfulness based cognitive therapy is my yoga therapy practice and my mindfulness teacher practice. And that is available for everyone.
That's so amazing. I think you have so many gifts. You're using them so well. I think your clients are super lucky to have you. I know we're super excited to hear you at the summit. I am so thrilled for this. So we will kind of close out our session today. We just want to say thank you so much with so much gratitude. Again, our summit is May 8th and 9th. We're so happy to have you. And then we'll have information on nutrition, how the forest heals, and all kinds of good things. So we thank you so much. And for our listening audience, Kathy Couch at rewired360.com. We will see you next time. Take care.